You know what I would say to a young person just discovering superheroes? Get hooked on Marvel comics. Obviously, there are great characters and stories and artists that originate from outside the big two comic book companies, but if superheroes are a thing you get into long term, sooner or later you're gonna start reading and watching stuff from the big two, and even if you consciously try not to, you're most likely gonna end up with a preference for one over the other, and that being the case, I'm telling you to consciously try to set your preference in favor of Marvel, because if you become a DC fan, you will never know peace. And I say this as a DC fan. The sad part is, a lot of the time, it's not even DC's fault. It's Snakebit, the whole company, especially when it comes to movie and TV adaptations. I don't think there's another entity that has that many beloved, universally known icons of popular culture under its umbrella that has been mismanaged and messed around and fucked over anywhere near as much as DC has in the last 30 or 40 years. That shit last week, the cancellation of the Batgirl movie and the announcement from Warner Brothers Discovery, the newly merged two-headed parent company, that from now on they're only adapting DC properties as blockbuster theatrical movies, that's only the latest episode in a series that's been running for as long as I've been alive. The Salkins buy the film rights to Superman, make a couple of great movies, to get our hopes up, and then spend most of the 80s running that franchise into the ground, culminating in 1987's Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, a film with opening credits that look like they were done by some nerd on an Amiga in his garage, and a sequence on the moon that looks like it was shot on an interactive exhibit at a children's museum. Warner Brothers hires Tim Burton to direct the first big-budget Batman movie starring Michael Keaton as Batman. It takes the world by storm, makes more money than the fucking Pope. A few years later, Burton makes a sequel, also a monster hit, but makes slightly less than the first one, plus a few parents piss and moan that it was too dark and scary for their 4-year-olds, or whatever. So WB panics, changes course, and 3 years later, we get this. And then they lean into this. And 2 years later, we get this. Meanwhile, on TV, there's a new Superman and a new Lois Lane. And the show is called Lois and Clark. And it's fun. And it gets to be its own thing. And then after 4 years, it gets canceled. And the last episode is a cliffhanger, never to be resolved. That's what you get. A few years go by, they start making Batman movies again, and finally it seems like they've got this shit figured out. They get a good director, Christopher Nolan, they get a great actor to play Batman, Christian Bale, fucking Michael Caine is Alfred, fucking Gary Oldman is Commissioner Gordon. The first movie's a little weak, if you ask me, but most people like it, so they make another one. Heath Ledger comes in as the Joker. Aaron Eckhart comes in as Two-Face. They got fucking Sheriff Romero from Bates Motel playing the mayor. It's The Dark Knight. It's one of the greatest superhero movies ever made. It makes more money than the Pope and the King of Saudi Arabia put together. Nolan makes one more Batman movie, not as good as the last one, but no reason to panic. WB hires Zack Snyder to make a Superman movie. Seems like a solid choice at first. Releases a trailer that makes it look like it's gonna be the most beautiful superhero shit you've ever seen. Movie comes out, and it's wall-to-wall dog shit. It's a Superman movie made by and for people who hate Superman. And it ends with Superman snapping the bad guy's neck, and then the movie expects us to feel bad for him over it. It's fucking horrendous. And to top it all off, the movie does okay at the box office, but it doesn't exactly light the world on fire. However, WB is counting on this movie to kickstart its Justice League movie franchise, DC's answer to the mighty Marvel Cinematic Universe. So they let Zack Snyder make another movie, and that one has a new version of Batman in it, plus his shitty, morose Superman, and it's even worse. It's the most depressing superhero movie ever. There's not a single moment in it that suggests anyone involved in making it has ever once experienced joy. But too late to back out now. Gotta get to that Justice League movie. So Zack Snyder makes his Justice League movie, and it's so bad, even the studio executives are like, oh shit, this is bad. They hire Joss Whedon, who made the first two Avengers movies, to come in and fix it, and he comes up with something a little better, but his version is still terrible, and as a result, the first Justice League movie is far less successful than the third Thor movie, and did you ever think you'd wind up living in that reality? Because I didn't. The thing is, while most people who can experience empathy and know what it feels like to be loved thought Zack Snyder's DC movies were garbage, a bunch of the worst people on the internet thought they were great. And when those people found out that WB had gotten Joss Whedon to fix Snyder's Justice League movie, they threw a big, coordinated, bot-assisted tantrum on Twitter to demand that the studio release Zack Snyder's original version instead. And at first, the studio was like, no, we're not going to do that because A, that version was terrible, and B, that version doesn't exist in a commercially releasable form because Zack Snyder never actually finished it. But then that Twitter tantrum lasted 3 years, and the studio said, okay, fine, and they gave Zack Snyder a bunch more money to basically make a new Justice League movie that was twice as long and twice as bad as the first one, and pretend that it was his original version, and they released that on HBO Max, a new streaming service that everybody hated. Things were looking grim, as usual, for movies and TV shows adapted from DC Comics, but then, slowly at first, but with gathering momentum, it started to turn around. The Wonder Woman movie was pretty good and did well at the box office. Ditto for the Shazam movie and the Aquaman movie, although, again, I wasn't overly impressed by that one, personally. The first Suicide Squad movie was horrible, but the next one was written and directed by James Gunn, and it was pretty great. So was the Birds of Prey movie. Then James Gunn wrote and directed an HBO Max spin-off series about one of the characters from his Suicide Squad movie, and it was called Peacemaker, and it was pretty much the best superhero show ever produced for a streaming service. There was also a Doom Patrol series that was quirky and hilarious and amazing. Meanwhile, on the CW, on regular TV, there was a whole mini-franchise of live-action superhero shows. Arrow, The Flash, Supergirl, Legends of Tomorrow, Batwoman, Black Lightning, critically acclaimed, attracting loyal and appreciative audiences, doing comic book-style crossovers with each other once a year. It was great! Finally, the CW added a new Superman show, Superman and Lois, and people said it was the best live-action version of Superman since the first Christopher Reeve Superman movie. Then, earlier this year, they released a new Batman movie, The Batman, directed by Matt Reeves and starring Robert Pattinson as Batman, and it was fucking outstanding. As good as The Dark Knight, and maybe even better. An epic pulp detective story that felt more like a big screen version of a classic Batman comic than anything else ever has. Made more money than J. Paul Getty would pay to ransom 7 of his grandkids after adjusting for inflation. And the good news kept coming. Michael Keaton was coming back as Batman. There was gonna be a Batgirl movie on HBO Max and a Flash movie starring Ezra Miller, one of the few bright spots of the Justice League movie. And WB was just gonna dump the whole Zack Snyder created DC Extended Universe and just let the directors of DC Comics adaptations focus on making good movies that people might actually want to see. It was everything we ever wanted. We stood on the cusp of a new golden age. We should have known. We should have known that the CW would be revealed as perennially unprofitable and put up for sale, threatening the future of great shows like Superman and Lois. We should have known Ezra Miller would turn out to be some kind of deeply disturbed monster who grooms children and harasses their families. We should have known that once Warner Brothers Discovery merged, the Batgirl movie and probably every other DC adaptation being produced for HBO Max would be permanently shit-canned to claim a tax write-off. We should have known because it always happens. Be it misguided executive meddling, editorial incompetence, or just cruel twists of fate, something always happens. And this is all just talking about the adaptations. The actual comics don't fare any better. The editors of DC Comics have been rehashing Crisis on Infinite Earths and rebooting their fictional universe every 3 months for the last 35 years. And they stand around scratching their heads going, why aren't people buying our comics? I have a better question. How do you fuck up Superman? Or how about this? How do you keep fucking up Superman? How do you fuck up this bad continuously for decades at a time when you've got Superman and Batman and Wonder Woman in your bullpen? It's the curse of Siegel and Schuster. That's what it is. Way back in the day, before it was owned by Warner Brothers, before it was even officially called DC Comics, the owners of DC Comics committed their original sin. They bought Superman, and then they stiffed the guys who created him, took their credit, didn't pay him their money, kicked him out on the street to die. Sure, in the 70s, they tried to make it good. They had to be shamed into it. And by then, it was too little, too late. The curse continued. And Warner Brothers and its various corporate parents did what corporations always do. They passed it along to the consumer. Now it's our curse. The DC Comics fans. We're the ones who have to suffer and keep suffering. I mean, they couldn't have pulled this shit on HBO Max before they made 4 seasons of Titans? Even when they're fucking up, they're fucking up.